Good afternoon and welcome to the show. I'm Luke McCormack. During today's show, we will discuss continuous diagnostic and mitigation, aka CDM, with government and industry leaders. With me on today's show are Kevin Cox, CDM Program Manager with CISA, James Saunders, Chief Information Security Officer at SBA, Gary Stevens, Executive Director, Information Security Policy and Strategy at Department of Veterans Affairs, Jim Richburg, Field Chief Information Security Officer at Fortinet, Egan Rinderer, Federal Chief Technology Officer and Global VP of Technology at Tanium, and David Ray, Chief Technology Officer, Micro Focus Government Solutions. Well, you know, depending on who you talk to, they'll say, you know, all that matters is knowing what's on the network, and ID management is the most important thing. Data is the new oil, and we need to encrypt it. If you're not zero trust, you're not secure. All these things matter. And what's been interesting is to watch all of these capabilities be accounted for in this program that has evolved called CDM. Well, let's start with you, Kevin Cox. You are the CDM program manager. You've been doing it for some time. Give us a top line, you know, where does the program stand at this point? A lot of different activity going on. You've been instrumental in making some key decisions about how things get implemented, how they get acquired over the last couple of years. What's the state of the state?
So with our new acquisition strategy in place, Defend, we have the vehicles to keep everything moving forward and to fill any remaining gaps, as you mentioned, with understanding what's on the network and who's on the network. The key thing for us as we head into FY21 is two things, two related things. Number one, getting the new dashboard in place. We awarded that new dashboard contract last May. It really opens everything up for us from a scalability and performance standpoint, and really the value to the agencies is increased 10 to 100-fold. The other related piece is the data quality management, making sure that the data coming up from the sensors is being reported accurately, being reported in a timely fashion. So those two things together in FY21 really will show the promise of CDM, what we've set out to do here in terms of getting the agencies the visibility, getting federal leadership visibility to understand what the agency and federal terrain looks like from a cybersecurity perspective.
Really does show the evolution of the program, right? It's not just, hey, we're collecting this data, right? We've been instrumenting it for some time. We've got a lot of capability out there. It's now about displaying it accurately, displaying it thoroughly, and making sure the quality of the data is fantastic. So James, let's throw it over to you. You've done a lot of work over there at SBA. You know, you guys have really been the agency that's been looked at to sort of suss out a lot of these capabilities and then implement them and sort of pressure test them. I mean, you certainly got pressure tested recently in regards to the activity that's been going on over the last few months. So give us sort of the state of where you all are right now with this program.
Absolutely. No, first and foremost, I really want to give a shout out to Kevin Cox and our Defend portfolio manager, Kelly Dixon, for working with us rebels, what I like to call us at SBA. I know we like to kick the tires and do things a teeny bit differently from that perspective. And to the team at SBA, we're willing to take a risk and slightly deviate from what's in technical environments 1 and 2 to great effect to really provide the value that we need internally and hopefully for the rest of the federal government. Now, with that said, SBA by no means has a monopoly on cloud-based security tools, but in context of the CARES Act implementation, PPP, as well as our COVID-19 response, leveraging some of these cloud-native technologies, integrating it with some of the future state activities around the CDM, particularly the ElastiStack, that really helps sharpen our respective saw so that when it was crunch time, when we're seeing actors, coming against our network, trying to, impact SBA's mission during the height of the COVID crisis, we were ready, we were there, we were able to respond in seconds and minutes versus days and hours where we were a couple years ago. So that was a huge benefit to us, and I really credit our work around CDM for that.
Really a benefit of having a lot of this instrument in place, having it be what we'll call soft technologies, if you will, and being able to turn it on, scale it very quickly to address the needs of your agency, which happen very rapidly, as you can imagine. Gary, how about at VA? Talk about scale. You all are doing scale at epic proportions over there, using these tools and techniques. And if I recall, you guys were very much an early adopter of the concept of CDM, if you will. Where are you all now on your journey there?
Well, first, I'd like to echo what James just stated. Kevin Cox, Dan DeRubo, they have been phenomenal people to work with. DHS has been there shoulder to shoulder with us, and it has been a phenomenal experience since inception in 2013 when I started. I think at the time it was Mark Niedinger who was leading the charge at that time.
Right.
And just to kind of put it in kind of context as well. So CDM has really evolved and matured since 2013. And that has been essential because as the Secretary's mandate for us and his priority is all about customer service. Well, customer service at a size and scale of the VA is enormous. We got 19.6 million veterans, 400,000 employees. We're the largest healthcare provider in the country and 56 regional data centers. I mean, the size and scale is enormous. I think at some points we are at 7.5 petabytes of data traversing the VA WAN. So CDM has been essential to our ability to gain visibility into what's happening within the environment. And I'd say that, you know, in conjunction with working with DHS and their contractor, I mean, we've really addressed it from a series of layers, almost looking at it from tools and sensors going up to the integration and then ultimately up to the agency dashboard. And within each one of those buckets, we've been able to really look holistically across the CDM portfolio with Forescale, BigFix, Splunk, and how they integrate, not only integrate as CDM tools, but also integrate holistically with everything else that we already have in place. I think when we first started, we looked at it as CDM as this panacea by itself. The reality is that it's not. It has to be part of an integrated approach, which is really our overarching ISCM strategy. And by evolving and moving towards that direction, we've really created this massive ecosystem that is helping drive forward change. And at this particular point, with one of the massive accomplishments that we made is that we've got about 95% visibility into all of our devices. We're confident. We're seeing everything on the within the environment. We've actually moved our CAP score as well that we typically report. And it's been fantastic. So the state of the state is great. Protecting veteran data as secure as it can possibly be and managing the environment, that's really what CDM's allowed us to do.
I'll tell you, it warms my heart to hear that. I'm sure every veteran out there loves to hear that as well, that you've really taken this beast and be able to pull all this data in and now sort of looking at it at a higher order again, up the value chain and really, you know, realizing the promise of what CDM actually is. Jim, how about over at Fortinet? You all have been in the ecosystem for quite some time, very much involved in this complex environment, multi-cloud environment we have now. Tell us, where do you fit into this environment and what's going on over at Fortinet?
Good afternoon, Luke. I'd like to build on the comments of my colleagues on this panel because I have seen this as a former federal executive grow out of something the federal government has been dealing with for a long time. I'm probably not the only one on this call who remembers the CNCI, the Comprehensive National Cybersecurity Initiative. The predicate for that was common operating picture of the health of federal networks and the ability to respond at machine speed. That is CDM by another name. So the federal government has been dealing with this for a long time. What I didn't fully appreciate when I retired from government at the end of 2018 was the extent to which the private sector, companies like Fortinet, have actually solved the underlying technical problems of the visibility and the control. The approach has been independently validated through third-party testing, and it comes from multiple vendor families. But the devil's in the details. The practical problem is implementing this in the context of federal budgets and procurement cycles. In other words, we know how to do this on a greenfield basis. The challenge is doing this in the real world on brownfield incremental upgrades within the federal government.
Yeah, and that implementation is so clutch, right? And those decisions that were made a few years ago, learning from, you know, the first round about how things got bought and implemented and flexing and realizing that, okay, we need to make some adjustments, I think has really been the key to the success of this program. That's certainly my opinion. Egon, you know, Tanium is interesting because Tanium comes out of the Petri dish, I think around 07. sort of shoots out of a cannon right about the same time that CDM was sort of being developed. So this technology was sort of on the same trajectory, if you will, came together very nicely, and certainly is a big part of what's making the CDM capability work. What's going on over at Tanium in regards to across the programmatic spectrum these days?
Yeah, it's interesting. Kevin nailed it when he brought up the data quality management piece of this, and that really, if you get down to brass tacks, that's why we exist today. We're a kind of generational step forward in terms of how we gather data. And one of the things that we're finding, we work with obviously with a great many customers in the CDM space. And one of the things that we're finding is that there is still a gap in terms of data quality. We have this concept, if I can move data from point A to point B very quickly, then I have good data, it's timely, it's accurate, it's complete. When the reality is you also have to assess the state of that data at point A. How stale is it? How long has it been there? And what really becomes fascinating, and this is kind of part and parcel to the impossible problem that 7 years ago we set out to solve, is as you get into the law of large numbers, all data becomes ephemeral. Things that we don't really consider ephemeral, machine state, machine presence, things like that. At a large enough scale, it becomes this living, breathing organism. And it's interesting to me because that's really what AWARE sets out to tackle. It's an incremental step forward, right? I think with AWARE, we've taken the beach, but we have to remember there's an entire continent that we also have to take here. But it's good progress, and it brings into account things like operational context of the endpoint, what data exists on the endpoint, where the endpoint is residing at the time of use. The problem is, especially now, as we've seen with this mass transition to distributed workforce, that's all become ephemeral. And so now there's this need for, rather than being able to say, well, 72-hour turnaround should be sufficient, there's this need to be able to look at things in real-time context as they're changing as a living, breathing organism. And so that today, that's sort of the problem that we're trying to help solve, to keep that incremental progress from halting.
Really sort of trying to get up to this light speed 0 day, we'll also say
continuous,
our trust
right?
in there, right? And we were all thrilled when, okay, all right, we've identified, or we think we have 100 devices on the network, and then we realized, no, actually we have 1,500 on the network, and now getting to the point where, okay, we know we have 1,500 on the network, we're just simply looking at the quality of the data. I'm going to jump over to Kevin for just a second and ask him, we're talking about AWARE, using these terms. Can you just really quickly give a top line, sort of, just for those that may be listening about CDM for maybe the first time or a couple of times they've heard some of these terms, just give them the top line of what those layers are so people understand that.
To get started with CDM, we were, as I mentioned, focused on helping agencies understand what's on the network. So that's the asset management layer. We also wanted to help agencies understand who their users are. That's the identity and access layer. We're also focused on network security management, helping agencies understand what's happening on their network, both on-prem as well as in the cloud. And finally, with data protection management, helping get the right data encryption, data loss prevention capabilities in place for high-value assets to make sure our most critical data is protected. The model for CDM then works where the data flows up from those different sensors and scanners up to the dashboard, both at the agency level, where the data is more detailed, object level, and then we summarize it up to the federal level. And then in the operationalization of CDM, with the rollout of the new dashboard, with the processes for data quality management, we're operationalizing that data, as Egon mentioned, with the AWARE algorithm, to really help agencies understand what their overall security posture looks like for vulnerability management, patch management, configuration management, et cetera.
Excellent. Excellent top line there, so everyone can, no pun intended, be aware of sort of the multi-layered, if you will, concept there that has gotten us to this point. David, let me throw it over to you at Micro Focus. And let me start with just describe to folks what Micro Focus is, and what journey that you've been on, and sort of how you fit into the ecosystem, and then give us the state of the state.
Sure. Well, thanks, Luke, for that. We're actually one of the largest software companies, pure play software companies worldwide. We have a very deep and wide portfolio, and we've been providing CDM capabilities, since 2013, the federal space. So people are probably more familiar with our brands, which originated with our merger with Hewlett Packard software, which I'm sure everyone recognizes, such as Fortify and ArcSight and our enterprise ICAM offerings in NetIQ. But through those acquisitions within Micro Focus, we've been able to focus and grow our security portfolio. So excited to be here today. And we've been in business about 40 years, which people don't realize. We want to be in business for the next 40 years, Luke, and we're very customer focused.
Very much some marquee brands in the community. But when people hear Micro Focus, I wanted to make sure they understand that there's all these great capabilities underneath of it that people are very familiar with. All right, well, let me roll it over to you, James, and talk about a specific program. There's been a lot of activity going on over at SBA, and I'm sure you've got more than one opportunity to highlight a program that really, CDM, this capability, was able to, address and solve a lot of those needs that you were embarking to implement.
It is tough to nail down a particular CDM program. I think as a whole that the CDM concept and intentions really helped us this past year. And realistically, this past year for SBA is going to be dominated by, again, CARES Act and response to the COVID-19 crisis. So it's really been a blur. So the circle back to that partnership, that was critical. When we needed some surge support, Kevin Cox and team was there. They helped us out. When we needed to, identify, how do we scale and expand and do X, Y, and Z, they were there to help out. So it allowed us to, in short, LEG went from 5,000 individuals to 20,000 individuals in the span of a month. With that, we did not have to figure out how to reformat or rebuild CDM, at least the cloud-based one. It was just ready to go. It was there. So I really think it was nothing specific for this past year that really made the difference. It's the work that we laid over the past 2-3 years that got us to this point. Speaking of the TIC work, CDM work, surge support, it got us to this point where we were able to respond the way that we needed to without going crazy, basically.
100% really put you in a position to scale, right? I mean, all the migration that you all had done with the into the cloud prior, the TIC work that you had done, some of the prototyping, et cetera, and the fact that you were able to just sort of, turn the dial up and make all that work, and knowing that, you had a lot of organizations from all over probably the world just pounding on those systems. Just super impressive to see that you all were able to sort of answer the message and take it to the highest order. So I applaud everybody over at SBA and over at the CDM program for helping make that happen. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back in a moment. You've been listening to the Federal Executive Forum on Federal News Network.